Hi there, and welcome to Off the Data Provided, an interpersonal communication podcast. I am, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. On today's episode, we are going to talk about making, building, and maintaining friendships in adulthood. Through our exploration, we will engage in concepts such as seeds of connection and parasocial relationships, while revisiting key terms and concepts such as investment, emotional closeness, trust, support, and external pressures. Also, stay tuned for this week's Ask Dr. Shepard, where we'll talk about the merry-go-round of casual dating and how to get off the ride. So when we get into our topic for today, friendships in adulthood, I think it's important to revisit this study conducted by One Poll for eVite back in 2019, where they surveyed 2,000 U.S. adults, and they found that 45% of adults found it hard to make new friends, and that the average American hasn't made a new friend in 5 years. So according to the survey, 45% of people would go out of their way to actually make new friends if they knew how or had more opportunities. Additionally, the 5 most common reasons why adults found it hard to make friends were 1, being shy or introverted, 2, bars not being really their scene, 3, friendship groups have already been formed, 4, family takes up too much of their time, and 5, lastly, they don't have any hobbies that allow them to meet new people. So when you couple all of that together, the study suggests that the average American only has 3 best friends, 5 good friends, roughly 8 people that they like but don't spend one-on-one time with. So these would be friends in maybe a larger friend group that comes together every once in a while. Had about 50 acquaintances. Those might be people you casually see at the gym if you go to the gym at a certain hour, or if you have a coffee order at a local shop and you go at the same time, people you run into and have small talk or social snacking, as we've talked about in earlier episodes. And then 91 social media friends. So when you put all of this together, 82% of those studies, though, felt like lasting friendships are hard to find. And the number one cause of a lost friendship is usually moving away, with 63% revealing that this had to be a reason they'd fallen out of touch with a former friend. So when we take a step back, and granted this study is a little dated now, we've been through, and we currently still are, in a global pandemic with COVID, and we know that there are other pandemics potentially on the rise, it seems as if people are lonelier and lonelier. So while they might be going out, while they might be having fun with people, they don't feel as connected with people. We know this is a huge issue. And so according to Kat Veloz, in her book, We Should Get Together, The Secret to Cultivating Better Friendships, she claims that we can't talk about how to fix the friendship problem without acknowledging and examining these contributing factors. And the most common that she found were hypermobility, busyness, relationship/family, and the shrinking capacity for intimacy in the digital age. So if we think about these potential issues, so hypermobility and busyness, people are always actively doing something, they're planning to do stuff, that can make it hard to foster new relationships if you're constantly caught in a schedule, in a plan. Additionally, as we've discussed before, friendships are oftentimes lower on the totem pole for the average person, so romantic relationships, familial relationships, sometimes even coworker relationships are going to take the lead, so they have less time for that. And then lastly, the shrinking capacity for intimacy in the digital era comes from the fact that a lot of people are just becoming more voyeurs of your life, or amiens, as we talked about before, and we'll revisit in our exploration of this issue. So for Kat, though, she argues that we have something called the seeds of connection. And so these are the core for her and her understanding and research on friendship to create and continue a quality friendship. So those 4 seeds are proximity, frequency, comparability, and commitment. So clearly, proximity is going to be the geographic and physical closeness that makes it easier to cross paths and share space. Frequency is going to be the combination of timing and repetition that allow you to foster fondness and familiarity. Comparability is going to be that capability of existing together in harmony. So are you going to get in a lot of dust-ups and fights and talking at each other, not with each other? Or are you able to communicate? Are you able to resolve conflict well? And then last but not least, of course, commitment. And so when it comes to commitment, are you actually showing up? Are you doing what you say you're going to do? Are you invested in terms of your own time, in terms of making space, in terms of reaching out and setting plans? So these coupled together, Kat argues, help create the bedrock and foundation for a friendship. And so I agree with her somewhat with the frequency, comparability, as well as commitment. Proximity, I think, especially in this digital age, can be mitigated, but of course, other factors are going to come into account. I think about, of course, economic factors are going to be really important here. And I think something that maybe is missed out a lot when it comes to friendship, if you're able to afford to fly or travel or to create these lasting quote unquote memories, sometimes these make it easier to foster friendships. And if you don't have access to that type of capital. And so I think that's sometimes missing from friendship research, just in general, as a scholar of interpersonal communication, is sometimes we're not maybe as honest about that factor. That clearly, if you're tight on money, you're working, you have multiple jobs, as we know a lot of people do, especially in this economic climate, you're definitely not going to have time. You're definitely not going to have resources to build these friendships. So even though you might desire these relationships, you're not going to be able to actually foster them. So we know that friendships are more likely, of course, to survive if the friends involved share the responsibility of that friendship maintenance and equability. And that, of course, brings me back to the friendship formula that we've talked about on earlier episodes that I've crafted myself, which I think is a mixture of investment, emotional closeness, trust, and support. So, of course, investment is your time, your feelings, your energies, your thoughts, even money. Emotional closeness is dialogue, self-disclosure, shared activities. And of course, this is going to be more deep conversations, not that surface level social snacking. Oh, how's the weather where you are? What shows are you watching? Things that get more so to the deep core and root of who we are. Of course, social snacking, as we've talked about before, is a great way to begin any type of interpersonal relationship where you talk about things that aren't as valuable in terms of who your inner core and self are, but they also allow you to slowly but surely self-disclose and get more comfortable with someone before you maybe explore your traumas, your deepest desires, your fears, things that we usually do with close friends and family members. Of course, we have trust, so not betraying your confidence and doing what you say you will do, and then verbal support as well as nonverbal support. So saying, you got this, I'm here for you, showing up for people. So I know I have a friend, won't reveal his name, but he is training to run a marathon and he asked for donations and support. Of course, I donated, but on top of that, I told him, whenever the race comes, give me a little heads up and I'll make sure I'm there to physically support you at the finish line. I'll be there with a Gatorade, with one of those aluminum foil towels, whatever he needs, I'll be there. That's also part of that support. So when I think about this issue as we ran through some of these dated data figures, and I'd say it's probably even gotten worse as I've seen more and more posts across different social media platforms of people clamoring and desiring friendship, it's clear that people are not investing. People are not putting the time and resources in. And that, as I said before, might relate to the fact that they just don't have enough to give. There's not enough in their tank in order to make that happen. But if you want to make that happen, then you need to find time, energy, feelings, maybe even some money if you can, to cultivate this. So this episode will drop right before the 4th of July. I know I always host a 4th of July party for my friends. And part of that is me investing, right? I'm providing all the food, so I'm paying for it. I'm grilling. I am making drinks. Usually I ask for people to maybe bring some drinks, but the only thing I'm really asking for is their time, their energy, their feelings, their thoughts. We'll maybe play some games, some emotional closeness. Maybe we will self-disclose some things during shared activities. I like to play a card game which asks kind of deep, thoughtful questions so we can get to know each other more, break up that monotony of just talking about sports or music or entertainment. So that is me investing in these friendships that are showing up. And then literally the next day after this, a friend in our friend group is now going to host a smoke out. He got a new smoker. He wants to smoke some meats and he's going to have us over. That's him investing and us also showing up to invest. These are friendships, though, that have been built on through the investment, emotional closeness, trust, and support. And if we go into the seeds of connection, most, if not all of these people are within maybe a 5-mile radius. So clearly proximity plays a part in making it easier for us. Frequency, the repetition. So I go to the movies a lot and I always invite the people who are coming to the barbecue to the movies. Most times they don't come. Sometimes they do come, depending if a movie catches their fancy. So we do have somewhat of a frequency, or even part of that group. We love to watch award shows. So we have a frequency when award shows are out. There'll be a text sent to the group chat that's literally, I think, called like Philly Movie Crew. And it'll be, hey, I'm doing this, or I want to do that. Or people will easily send something out into that chat. And sometimes people show up, sometimes they don't. So clearly proximity is going to be more important and vital for those kind of day-to-day friendships. But I know, for instance, for friendships that I've actually built and cultivated, two of my closest best friends literally were cultivated from Twitter and don't even live in the same state as me. One of them I cultivated while I was living all the way in Los Angeles in grad school, and he was living in North Carolina finishing up his coursework for undergrad, right? We were thousands of miles away, but through Twitter, through our investment, through our emotional closeness that we started to share, through trust, support, we grew our friendship. And what's interesting, a quote I'll pull from Kat's book, is she states that when only one person in a relationship is giving dedicated attention, encouragement, and nurturing to the other, that's not a friendship. It's either therapy or life coach-client relationships, and it's usually accompanied by a hefty fee. And why I bring this into the discussion after just saying, I built a really strong friendship with someone who lived thousands of miles away from me, and we see each other now at least once a year for about a week, if not more. We talk on the phone with some frequency. As I've shared before, Zamir doesn't love being on the phone, but he does make allowances because I like to be on the phone. So we'll talk for 2 hours or so every few weeks, and we'll text in between. We'll share things on social media, and we always plan to see each other around Thanksgiving, if not even earlier, sometime in the fall, because he and I both love cool weather. So we have here where we're both invested. We both are giving dedicated attention, encouragement, nurturing each other. And so it doesn't feel one-sided. And we know that inadequate follow-through is usually one of the biggest friend-related frustrations that people deal with. And it's usually the reason why friendships fall apart, especially when you're a burgeoning friendship and it's growing. If someone doesn't do what they say they're going to do, or one miss hangout and somebody doesn't follow through about it, the friendship deteriorates. So we know that it's going to be important that there's a give and take, a push and pull with any type of friendship. You don't want to feel like you're the therapist or you're the life coach. You want to feel as if the other person is interested in what you have going on as well, that they're investing, that they are supporting you, that they are sharing with you and also listening to you share. So one thing I think is interesting, that I think when people say that they want friendships, I think they have to take a step back and think about, how have I shown up in these burgeoning friendships, and why did they fall apart? Did they fall apart because I wasn't following through? Did they fall apart because the friendship was one-sided on my part or on the other person's part? And if so, how can we work through that for the next friendships that I find? So your commitment is going to be made up of caring, trust, dedication, reciprocity. And that reciprocity is really going to be key for any friendship. And so I know I went viral, was it a year, maybe 2 ago? I don't keep track, where I shared a screenshot of someone reaching out asking for words of wisdom because I always had them. But this was someone who I had just recently exchanged my phone number with off of social media. We had built a rapport. We had talked a few times on the phone. We had texted. But in the 7 weeks that we had known each other offline, I hadn't heard from this person for 3 weeks until they popped up and said, "Hey, I know I haven't been in touch, but could you give me some words of wisdom?" And when that happened, I said, declined. And I basically said, you can seek other people out for that who you've clearly been in consistent contact with these last few weeks. Those people clearly mattered more than I did, but all of a sudden now you're looking for that therapist or life coach relationship, right? And I wasn't getting paid. I am a certified relationship coach, but you were not paying me for my wisdom or my words. You wanted them as a quote unquote friend, but the friendship was one-sided. You never really asked what was going on in my life. You never asked any issues I was having. The friendship seemed to be you always venting to me about what was going on in your life and your career, but never asking me. So the 3 weeks happened because there was no reciprocity. I had asked you how your day was and you didn't respond for 3 weeks, and then pops up and disregards how the day was, right? Or, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but hey, can you provide something for me?" So I think a lot of people have to take a hard look at themselves when it comes to friendships and figure out, am I actually showing up as a good friend? And if I'm not, how can I become better in how I show up as a friend? I genuinely believe that we can all be better communicators, and communication is, of course, central to any interpersonal relationship. I get paid to teach this stuff. I get paid to research this stuff. It is my life's work, but I also still believe that I can always become better. I don't think anybody reaches the apex of communication. I think it's an endless climb, and we can only get better and better and adapt. As we've talked about on this podcast, no two relationships are alike. So even though I have my Power Rangers, I call them, right, my 5 closest best friends, I engage with them all differently. Some of them I talk to every day, or basically all day. Some of them I talk to less frequently. Some of them it's seasons where we're more frequent and seasons where we're not. But I've learned to maneuver and understand that not all friendships are alike. And I think that's really what's important when it comes to adulthood, is taking a step back and figuring out, what do you actually want out of your friendships? And what can you also provide your friendships? Because you don't want them to be one-sided. You want them to be reciprocal. And once you figure that out, I think you have a better ability to enter into the quote unquote friendship market and find what you are looking for. I think it's just as similar with dating, as I always talk about with my students, is you become a stronger person in the dating economy when you know exactly what you want and know exactly what you can provide or what you believe you can provide. Because then you can kind of show up and realize that, okay, I really like this person, but maybe we just aren't compatible. And that happens in friendships as well. I've been introduced to people who I thought I would be great friends with, but they maybe weren't interested in being friend with me. Even though we hit it off, we were compatible in terms of similar interests. We didn't argue. We had frequency because our mutual friend was always having us around each other. Clearly, there was a proximity. It just didn't take off because the other person wasn't necessarily committed to being in that friendship. And that's okay. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just means we weren't compatible, or what I was looking for out of a friendship, that person wasn't either. So I think when you realize, take a step back and really analyze what is going on with maybe your lack of friendship or why your friendships turn sour, you can then turn the tide and create stronger relationships. And of course, as we talked about, and I think one of the main issues that is coming in 2025 and beyond, as we've referenced in earlier episodes, is AI, right? Artificial intelligence. We know that that's on the rise with people using that as an outlet for friends because they have no one to talk to. So they talk to the AI instead. Or kind of the antisocial social media, where we think sharing our life updates on social media is creating relationships with people, where I think it's actually more so crafting new kind of parasocial relationships where we feel a sense of connection to these people that we follow, or maybe we call them mutuals, right? They share things, I share things. We might engage publicly on the timeline. We might even DM each other. But outside of the maybe positives is a sense of belonging and increase maybe confidence that you have. You might feel a reduction of stigma because there are similar people out there to you. I especially think about people who live in more rural areas or live in less diverse areas that don't have people that look or think or feel like them. That social media can be a great gateway to feel like you belong somewhere, because you do, just might not be physically where you are. You might feel isolated, but social media gives you that aspect of belonging. You might have an increased self-confidence or social skills. We have found in different studies that those people who have shared that they are more shy can become less shy online. I've met people, especially online. As I've said, I've made some great friendships online who online, they're very boisterous, verbose. They aren't afraid to share their thoughts and opinions. Then you meet them and they're a little more shy. So we do know that social media can provide these people an outlet. So there are positive aspects, but then it's about how can we move these online burgeoning relationships offline, because a lot of times we really are just voyeurs and we might be finding ourselves becoming amiens of previous friendships. So as I've outlined my own work back in 2018, I created this concept of amienships, because amienships are a rising group of people due to social media who aren't your friend because you're no longer actively investing, right? Friendship, in my opinion, is an active investment. But what that investment is, you decide. So there are friends that I haven't talked to maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, but I'm still actively investing in that relationship. It just looks maybe a little differently. They also, as we know, amiens aren't former friends because you didn't have a falling out. And they're not acquaintances because you actually have a shared history with these people. These are oftentimes maybe your college friends that then you graduated, you moved away, and you're not keeping in relative contact with them. Right? These are people maybe you were really close, you moved out of college, your first job, and you became friends with people at work, and then you took a new job. And so these were relationships once built on and maintained through investment, but are now maintained more so through following and limited interacting on social media. So I like your post, or I retweet your tweet, or I watch your TikTok, or I might comment on it. Maybe I DM you something funny every now and then. But that's the extent of our relationship. We're not having those deep, more so nurturing, robust, vulnerable conversations. And so even Kat, in her book, We Should Get Together, The Secret of Cultivating Better Friendships, firmly believes that a robust immersion and quality connection marked by vulnerability, self-disclosure, and empathetic listening experienced in a concentrated form can fast-track a friendship into existence in a shorter amount of time. And that shorter amount of time would be less than, quote-unquote, 200 hours, which is kind of this magical bubble formula that was created years ago by a communications scholar named Jeffrey A. Hall. And so we know that if you have these deep, vulnerable conversations with people, you can feel much closer to people in a shorter amount of time. Of course, those are going to start off with the social snacking. Those, what's your favorite movie, favorite color, what do you like to eat? What is, bad movie you saw? Why didn't you like it? Or what's the book you're reading? Those types of things eventually lead you to be more vulnerable, more confident, more comfortable with somebody. And usually someone has to take a leap in that self-disclosure. So maybe you might say you really enjoyed this movie, let's say The Materialist, the movie I talked about in the last podcast. I really enjoyed it, and I open up why I enjoyed it. And part of that might be my own personal experience with dating. And because now I'm talking about my own personal experience with dating, maybe this newer friend will open up about their experience with dating. And then that might snowball, so on and so forth. But you have to be willing to be vulnerable in order to create these friendships. So I think part of the issue also with adults and not necessarily having friendships is this antisocial social behavior where I want to be around you, I want to hang out, I want to talk to you, but the quality of our conversation is as deep as a centimeter, which is nothing. So you want to make sure that you're having these quality conversations. And clearly, maybe a bar, a club are not the greatest places to do that, right? But a lot of younger adult culture is usually formed around those. Let's go to the bar, let's go to the club, let's go here, there, whatever. And so you're not able to have these meaningful conversations. So if you do meet people out in those settings, you probably want to then plan to meet them in a different setting and see if there is a connection there to grow a friendship. I also think when it comes to queer friendships, as I say, I've seen a lot of conversations with some gay men sharing that they find it hard to create friendships because there's always the sexual aspect. I think an issue there is people living in the gray. And so when you live in the gray and you're like, oh, am I interested in this person romantically or not? But let me keep them around and figure it out. It never really works out for either party because one, the person might actually be interested in you romantically, and friendship is never a consolation prize. So you want to get out of that and just be black and white with it. If you like this person, but you're really just looking for a friendship, you need to let them know. And so they can either show up for you as a friend, or if they truly do want something romantic, you then know that and can decide not to engage with them. And we do know that sexual compatibility sometimes can be an issue for friendships. So even homosexual relationships, right? Heterosexual friendships, where if the man shares with the woman that he's interested in being more than friends and she's not interested, sometimes that fractures and ends that burgeoning friendship. But to me, especially as adults, where we know our time due to our hypermobility and busyness is at an all-time high, especially in this economy, as we always say, to me, being black and white allows you to make those moves clearer and cleaner. But a lot of people, for whatever reason, and I do have my thoughts on that, love to live in the gray. And I think one reason why they like to live in the gray is they're afraid if they're truthful or honest with someone that they won't like them as much or they won't be interested in them as much. And as someone who was treated by a former friend, right? Keyword former friend, as someone he put me in the gray for a while, I didn't appreciate that. And once we came out of that gray, we were able to foster a pretty solid friendship until it became clear that it wasn't equitable, where I was the one reaching out all the time. I was the one making all the plans. And so the moment I pulled back and was going to see, hey, they going to call me? Are they going to set up a plan? It never happened because it's easy. Any interpersonal relationship, as we have explored, is easy to be in when the other person is doing the majority of the work. And so a lot of times I think about when people talk about friendships and the desire for friendships, are they actually willing to do the work? Any interpersonal relationship is going to require work. And if you haven't felt as if your friendship requires a lot of work, it's probably because that other friend is doing a lot of that work. Being the friend that usually does a lot of the work, I can tell you that. So I have let a lot of friends go over the years, especially, COVID, and we're still was eye-opening for me, and a lot of the work that I was doing for people that wasn't being reciprocated. And of course, it's not, well, I paid for dinner, so you need to pay for dinner next time. But if I'm always making the plan, you can't say, oh, how about we do this? Or I have no issue, right? I live a pretty flexible life with my job where I have a few days off during the week. So I have long weekends. So I have friends that live out of town. A lot of my close friends, actually all my best friends, don't live very close to me. But it takes nothing if a friend or I come together and we plan something that, okay, I have no issue taking on more of the economic burden of buying a flight and coming to visit you if you're going to be helping plan stuff. So when I get there, what are we going to do? I'm more of a homebody, so I don't mind just chilling at the house, but clearly we're going to need to pick up some food. I don't mind cooking, or if my friend is a good cook, as Janine is, right? Hopefully you cook for me, right? So these are things that happen, but it's just not me always pushing the cart. And hopefully my friends also don't feel like it's just them pushing the cart either. So that is usually the biggest root issue is this inadequate follow through from your friends. And so people get frustrated, and especially if it's a burgeoning friendship, the friendship just falls apart. And I've experienced that living in Philly a lot of times, where I had one friend who was becoming closer and said that he needed like a 3-month break to figure out his life and he didn't want to be bothered by anyone. I said, okay, cool. Mind you, we were only about 3-4 months into building our friendship. And then those 3-4 months ended and he reached out and I said, hey, what's going on? I'd love to get together. He was like, well, I'm free at this day at this time. I was like, oh, well, that's not going to work. Can we think of another time? Clearly, your calendar seems to be more stretched than mine. So putting that out there to the friend never got back. Oh, well, I genuinely wish that person the best, or former friend or acquaintance the best, but that's just how life moves, unfortunately. So when it comes to adulthood and friendship, to kind of capstone what we've been talking about, it's going to be really important that you first take a step back and think about, why has your friendships failure to launch? Or if they have launched, what brought them down? Once you figure that out, and of course, no two friendships are alike, but there can be some similarities. Was it the lack of investment? Was it the lack of emotional closeness? Was it the lack of trust? Was it the lack of support? Was it feeling as if there wasn't equity when it came to creating plans, to maintaining, to investing? Once you figure that out, that's going to be your first thing. Second, what are you actually looking for in friendships? And different types of friendships. So clearly, my Power Rangers, those are the people I am raw, unfiltered with. I just let it all hang out and we pick up the chips together. And then I have some friends outside of that where we have fun, we have a good time, and I genuinely wish them the best. And sometimes they'll come for me for advice. Sometimes I'll go to them for advice, but it's not as deep as my best friends, right? So those, maybe one would argue, are close friends. And then I kind of have space for friends of friends, and that's my life, right? So first you need to figure out, well, what are you looking for? Are you looking for that best friend? Are you looking for a friend of friend? Are you looking for close friends? And what do those mean for you? So how I define them doesn't necessarily mean how you define them, but also how does that other person define them? Then what you're going to want to also do, as we've talked about before, is have friendship check-ins. So Janine and I are great with this, and I do this with some of my other friends as well from time to time, just checking in, lifeline of our friendship. Has there been something I haven't really done that you wanted me to do that maybe you didn't feel like you could tell me in the moment? Are there things that I'm doing that you feel like I need to stop, right? So one of those for some friends was like the unsolicited advice, because I'm always trying to be the problem solver. Okay, so I've heard this. So for some of them, I just take a step back. They just want to vent. I'm here to listen. And sometimes I might say, hey, do you mind if I offer? Or can I say? And sometimes they'll say, sure, yes, that's why I was coming to you. Or they'll be like, well, not right now. It's still raw, it's still fresh. Great. Doesn't take anything away. So figure those things out. What can you offer? What are you looking to offer? And then come up with a game plan of where you're going to meet these people. So it's becoming summertime, so clearly there are more activities. I know here in Philadelphia in particular, there's something called SIPs, which is a Wednesday. Every Wednesday, these bars and restaurants do a later happy hour, and so the city is usually very lively. So if you're looking for friends, that might be a great thing if you're here in Philadelphia, right? But I'm sure other cities and other places do that as well. Additionally, there is social media, which can be a great place to initiate that spark of a nascent friendship, that very early beginning. But then you need to make plans to move that friendship offline, and then also not just in the phone, but face-to-face in person. Eventually. Of course, proximity is going to make it easier or harder. If someone, for instance, I become friendly with on social media lives in New York, that's going to be a lot easier to see one another in person. I can take the train up to see them than it is if I make a new friend who lives in Chicago or LA or Dallas. I'm going to probably have to get on a flight, or they're going to have to get on a flight. But we need to move the conversation offline and be on the phone, texting, and getting into deeper self-disclosures, some video chats maybe even as well. This is going to be really important as social media has made it harder for us to really connect. And part of that is these posts that we share, whether they're long captions, they're threads, they're videos, they're reels, they're TikToks, it gives us, the viewers, this illusion of having a shared meaningful interaction with the person who posted that. So I think about those get ready with me videos that a lot of people post. You feel a little connected. You're literally in this person's bedroom. You're in their bathroom. You're in their kitchen. You're all throughout their house. You feel this deep, meaningful connection with them that doesn't actually exist, or you feel more connected to them than you actually are. And so it's going to be really important to remove that illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. And I think that, unfortunately, is what has happened for a lot of social media users, and why a lot of people complain about having a lack of meaningful friendships or just a lack of friendships in general, is because they have an illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. And the demands of friendship require work. It's going to require you to invest in me, that time, the feeling, the energy, the thoughts. It's going to require emotional closeness through shared dialogue and self-disclosure, or doing activities together. It's going to require trust, so not betraying your confidence, doing what you say you will do. If you're going to come to my party, you're going to show up, not last minute, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm not going to be able to come. It's going to require support. It's going to require you showing up for me. It's going to require you believing in me, and vice versa. And so what happens with social media is you feel as if you're connected or friendly with these people, but you're not really investing in them. You're not necessarily emotionally disclosing with them. Maybe you're building some trust, and maybe their response to you felt like support, but it's not the true demands and work of what friendship requires. And so if we're more honest with ourselves about that, how we have allowed social media to infiltrate our lives and to make us do less work on friendships. They've made it, quote unquote, easier to feel connected to people. But ultimately, that connection isn't as robust, as meaningful, as deep. I often relate it, I'm a foodie here, to a really delicious, savory meal that someone maybe invites you over to have, that they've cooked and worked on for hours, right? I love to cook, so every now and then I'll invite friends over. And that meal is going to stick to you, right? If I invite you over for a homemade brunch and I make bacon, eggs, and grits and waffles or pancakes, and I make mimosas and rum punch, you're going to be full all day. But if I say, hey, let's go to McDonald's and grab a breakfast sandwich, you're probably going to be full for a moment, and then you're going to be hungry again. And that, unfortunately, is what happens a lot with social media. It's that dopamine effect where you feel connected, where you feel like these are your friends. But then you take a step back and, wait a minute, where are these people? They're just on my phone. They can't hug you. They can't console you in that support. You can't have a real deep, meaningful dialogue with them. So while it is an epidemic, and we know why it is, as this episode hopefully is outlined, and we have the tools to fix it, it's about you taking that first step. So that first step of analyzing yourself, analyzing what you want, what you need out of friendships, analyzing what you can offer friendship. Also is going to require you to be vulnerable with people. You might have to be the first person to take that first vulnerable step outside of social snacking, to share something. Hey, I want to tell you about this really bad date I went on and how it made me feel, or I was talking to someone and they ghosted me and I feel upset about it, or here's what's going on at work, or here's an issue I'm having with my family. It's going to take you to be brave, to be vulnerable. And then you have to get out there, whether it's getting on a social media platform and finding friends. For me, as a homebody, that's exactly what I did when I moved to Philadelphia. I literally went on Tinder and I said, I'm just looking for friends. And I made friends, and I'm still friends with two of the people I matched with, right? All the way back in 2016. And we're in 2025, right? 9 years. I'm still friends with these people. One of them, unfortunately, won't be able to come to the barbecue because he'll be out of town on vacation. Love that for him. But we're still great friends. And so getting out there, whether it's on social media, whether it is going to your local bar, it doesn't have to be. I'm not a bar person, really. I'm not a lounge person, really. I'm an activities person. So The summertime is perfect for that. Usually, wherever you are, the weather is nicer, so people are out. They might have block parties, they might have festivals, they might have a whole bunch of things. Look and figure it out and go. And if you see someone and they're wearing something nice and you think they look cute, tell them. And that can build or foster just a small social snacking and can create friendships. It's not rocket science. It is interpersonal communication, though. But it's nothing to be afraid of. And if you really want to create new friends, we have the tools. So as we started with the data, right, that 45% of adults found it hard to make new friends, I believe that because they don't have the tools. They haven't been told what to do. But this episode, other earlier episodes, have provided you with some of those tools. So if you really are feeling lonely, feeling a little isolated, it's time to take that step out. Remove these parasocial relationships that you have and think about those seeds of connection. Think about that proximity, that frequency, that comparability, that commitment. Also think about the friendship formula that I believe in: investment, emotional closeness, trust, and support, and figure out how you can make that work. So that's all I'll say on today's episode regarding adult and friendship. A little tongue twister for myself, but being an adult and trying to foster and look for friendship. So now we are going to move into the Ask Dr. Shepard. So as I previewed before, this is about getting off the merry-go-round of casual dating and how to find what you're looking for. So Anonymous, the person said not to use their name, says, "Hi, Dr. Shepard. I've become really frustrated on the dating scene. I've been on different apps for several years and everything always goes the same. We start chatting on the app, we'll exchange social media, we will then maybe exchange phone numbers, we'll text, talk on the phone, then it falls off, we never meet, rinse, recycle, repeat. How can I get out of this merry-go-round of casual dating? I want to find my partner, I want to find my person, and I feel as if I am getting burnt out of the dating scene. Any tips you can offer would be greatly appreciated." Well, Anonymous, thank you for sending this out. I think this is an issue so many people find themselves in today, where these apps, especially when it comes to dating, are kind of gamified. We know, right? It's a swipe left, a swipe right, check or an X. It feels like a game. You kind of are looking at people. Do I find them attractive? Do I not? And sometimes people are literally on there just to see how many people they can match with. They're not even looking for a relationship. So first and foremost, I would say is you have identified that you want a committed romantic relationship from what I've gathered. So you want to make that very clear and put that on your profile. Second, actually read people's profiles. I know when I was on those apps, I was guilty of just swiping on, faces I found attractive. But actually read the profile. This is actually what you're looking for, and see if the person is looking for what you're looking for as well. Because sometimes you're just not compatible, and that's also why they're falling off. They're falling off because you might be looking for something long-term and they're looking for somebody just for tonight. So that's not going to work out. You want to also be clear on what your non-negotiables are on your profile, because anybody that would be compatible with you is not going to be afraid if you say, I'm on here, I'm looking for my partner, these are the things I'm interested in, I want to have kids or I don't want to have kids, I do drink, I don't drink, I smoke, I don't. Lay it all out there. If someone is meant for you, they're not going to be afraid that you know who you are and know what you want. So that's first and foremost is going to be important. How you set up your profile and how you engage with these profiles. Then second, you need to have a realistic countdown in your mind for when it's clear someone is just treading water, or if you guys are actually maybe swimming towards each other. So for instance, people get caught up in the good morning, good night text. And a lot of people, when they first match with each other and maybe move things offline, that's a lot of that. Good morning, good night, how's your day going? What I think is actually more substantive is having more meaningful conversations. So I don't need to talk to you every day, all day. And I think this has become a negative of technology, of social media, of cell phone culture, where if I think about a lot of my parents' generation, for instance, if somebody liked you, we went on a date, we had a good time, we went to our respected houses, and we planned the next date. And we talked in between there, but I wasn't on the phone with you all day, every day because I have work, I have other commitments. And slowly but surely, I made more of my life available to you. What happens now with a lot of dating is we match, we exchange phone numbers after matching and talking on the app maybe for a few days and loving the rapport. And then we're talking to each other every day, all day, every day, all day, every day, all day. And it becomes monotonous. The conversations usually are surface level. It's social snacking. And people aren't necessarily being very vulnerable. And you're also not moving towards going on a date. So if you exchange numbers with someone, the goal should then be within 2 to 3 weeks of exchanging numbers, you are going to physically see that person, especially because most of these dating apps are due to proximity. So you're close enough where you should be able to see that person. So you talk on the phone, you figure out a plan, and also make it clear that, I'm interested in getting to know you, but I don't want the cell phone through texting or even just phone calls to be the way we get there. I want it to be in person. So set that expectation. And then that will guide you to hopefully get off this merry-go-round. Woo, excuse me, right? Merry-go-round of talking and then it never advancing. Talking, never advancing. Good morning, good night, good morning, good night, good morning, good night. Someone doesn't respond to the good morning. You maybe decide to double text. They don't respond again, or maybe they do respond. Then you lapse, then they lapse, and then eventually it just goes off the rails and neither of you are talking to each other. So I say, first and foremost, make sure your profile is explicit on what you're looking for. Second, actually read these people's profiles. Don't just, they're attractive, we'll figure it out. Third, once you exchange phone numbers, 2 to 3 week deadline of meeting in person. Of course, someone might have a work trip or there might be some extenuating circumstances, but outside of that, there's really no excuse why you can't meet someone within 3 weeks if you both allegedly are interested in one another. So that is what I would say to you, Anonymous, and to anyone who's had issues with that merry-go-round. And I hope to see you all on the next one.